Good morning. My name is Lisa Regan, and I'm a reading interventionist at Mary Daly.
I am Alice Saul, and I am also a reading interventionist at Mary Daly.
Before we begin today, we'd like to give you a little background on how this session came to be. Like most of you in elementary school, we have been participating in professional development activities presented by Smeckens Education. In addition to those PD sessions, we've also been lucky enough at Daly to have further PD for the last 2 years presented by Christy McCullough and Courtney Gordon, also from Smeckens. Through those sessions, we were introduced to resources from Jan Richardson. The next step forward in guided reading is one of those resources.
Perhaps you're a new teacher who is unfamiliar with all of the components of guided reading. Maybe you're a veteran teacher who chose this session as a brief refresher or companion to practices you already use. Whatever the case, we hope that you will find this session useful to you as you work forward to move your students in reading.
While we will touch on various portions of your reading block, the primary focus for this session is guided reading. We will not have a live chat today as we are doing a larger presentation in our building. However, Brian has provided you with our email addresses, and we have added them on the last slide as well if you wish to communicate with us.
With that being said, let's get started.
What is guided reading? Guided reading is just one component of a balanced literacy program. As you can see in the slide, it is defined as small group, differentiated instruction that supports students in becoming proficient readers. Why do we use it? All of us have students who come to us with different backgrounds and instructional experiences. One size does not fit all. Guided reading allows us to target specific needs, provide scaffolding, and use gradual release to ensure student success. What are the essential elements of guided reading? In order to ensure that success, there are 3 main components of guided reading that are crucial. Instruction provided in a small group, using students' instructional text level, and the instruction itself targeted to the needs of the students. Let's focus a little more on each of these components, beginning with small group instruction. Because groups are teacher-led, it allows us to provide support as students face difficulties in reading. When students feel supported, they will be more willing to take risks when trying to comprehend. Guided reading groups should be comprised of 4 to 6 students. Yes, we hear you. The obvious question is, how can I do that? Simply put, by not meeting with each group every day. Some of you may already be structuring your guided reading groups that way. For others, you may be used to the idea of 3 reading groups: above level, on level, and below level. While that may make things easier for us, there is no possible way we can meet the needs of all of our students using that practice. The next component is that instruction is based on student need. This is a big one. Before you can form and implement your guided reading groups, assessment is crucial, both in forming your groups and then in determining when your students are ready to move on. We will address assessment more specifically in a later slide. The group configuration is not constant. It doesn't last for a set amount of time. Since you will be leading these groups, you will be making informal assessments along the way. When you feel your students have mastered the skills necessary for that level, set new goals for them and move them forward. The next component for your guided reading groups is slightly challenging texts. Students should be reading at their instructional level, not their independent level. The text should be a little bit too hard. In your guided reading groups, the students do the reading, not the teacher. Unlike what some may believe, guided reading is not round-robin reading. All kids are reading the same text at once. You are listening to one student read, while the others are whisper reading to themselves. Your job is to listen to each student read for a bit of time. Make note of the challenges they face as they read, how they are solving these problems, and what strategies they are using. Excuse me. By listening to them read, you will learn their struggles, and it informs your next steps. Mistakes are opportunities for you to teach and them to learn. The final component we will speak to today is targeted teaching. This is a big one. We touched briefly on the fact that assessments are needed to guide your instruction. We have been given some flexibility in Elkhart Community Schools. Therefore, the assessments used at one building are probably different than those used at another. For example, at Daly, we have begun using Pioneer Valley assessments to determine our students' reading levels. Other assessments you may be using include Fountas and Pinnell, Dibbles, Rigby, and Reading A to Z, for example. While NWEA does provide a Lexile level, one downfall is that you are not interacting with your student while they take that assessment. It is imperative that you use some form of individual assessment that allows you to observe their reading behaviors and take note of them. Your students will be most successful when you know them as readers. One huge consideration, as you well know, is to use more than one assessment to determine student need. Depending on the grade level you are working with, you may need to administer letter sound assessments, running records, dictated sentences, sight word assessments, and word study inventories, just to name a few. Word study assessments provide additional information regarding specific skills needing to be taught at all levels. I will touch on some of the things you're looking for, and there will also be a link to an assessment chart that has all of these items listed. For emergent readers, some things to consider are whether students know letters and sounds, know and can write sight words, hear sounds in words, match one-to-one, use pictures, use first letters, and use meaning, structure, and visuals to help them read text. For early and transitional readers, consider whether students self-monitor using meaning and visuals, solve words, read fluently, retell completely, and spell phonetically. For fluent readers, there are different considerations depending on the genre of text a student is reading. For fiction, consider the following. Can a student retell, ask and answer questions, summarize, apply vocabulary strategies, analyze characters, infer, and evaluate? When reading nonfiction, can a student retell, ask and answer questions, identify main idea and details, summarize, apply vocabulary strategies, analyze relationships such as compare, contrast, and cause-effect, infer, evaluate, and recognize and understand text features and text structures? We have provided assessment charts on this slide for you to use as you assess and evaluate your students. Simply click on the link and it will take you to an assessment chart for each level of reader. Once you have completed your assessments and grouped your students based on their specific needs, you are ready to begin your guided reading groups. The responsibility in those groups is shared. The student reads, you listen, observe, question, prompt, and coach based on your observations. You will not do the same prompting and coaching with each student, because their needs may be different and change as they are growing as readers. Your involvement is key, from preparation, observation, interaction, and determining next steps. The chart shown here gives us a summary of the balanced reading approaches that comprise the entire reading block. We'll give you a minute to look at it before we go on. As you can see, guided reading is just one of the components of this approach. It cannot be effective if it stands on its own. The other three include shared reading, independent self-selected reading, and read-alouds. In the next steps forward in guided reading, Jan Richardson describes guided reading as the scaffold between modeling and independence. It is particularly important to notice the differences in the way the instruction is delivered, the text level used for each, how the text is read, and the purpose of each component. In order for each to be effective, teachers must consider those differences in their planning and implementation. As we said earlier in the presentation, most of this is not new to you. Be especially careful to plan your read aloud as well as you plan your shared and guided reading. You should have pre-read the text, looking for opportunities to address context clues, predictions, inferences, and the specific standards and strategies you are teaching in your shared reading.
There are many questions that arise when discussing guided reading. One is, how is guided reading different from literature circles? Guided reading groups are formed based on data collected by the teacher. The students are reading at their instructional level with a challenging text the teacher has chosen to meet a specific comprehension strategy. The teacher is scaffolding, prompting, and discussing the text with students. Literature circles, on the other hand, are formed by student interests, usually a novel or fiction book. Students are reading the same text at their independent level without teacher support. Students meet a few times a week to discuss, make predictions, ask questions, and express their opinions about their book. Guided reading always happens during a reading workshop, while literature circles are optional. Guided reading and literature circles can coexist, usually in intermediate classes. I will give you a minute to review the chart. You may be asking yourself, how can I make this work? The first step is critical and can take up to 6 weeks. In order for students to be independent and solve problems on their own, routines will need to be explicitly and consistently taught. Start the reading workshop by building community and collaboration. Implement a schedule that gradually releases responsibility from the teacher to the students and teaches classroom routines and procedures. Jan gave an example of a teacher so excited after a workshop, she went back to her classroom and taught her students 6 literacy centers and began guided reading groups. It was a disaster. Students must be taught independence for guided reading to work properly. Teaching routines explicitly helps build that independence. Just like Smeckens, Jan Richardson suggests 6 weeks before guided reading is fully implemented. Plan to keep your independent activities simple. Students should be reading, writing, listening, and speaking softly if they are working with a partner. These are purposeful practices of authentic reading and writing activities. No matter what the students are doing in their station, it is important they understand the procedures and expectations for each activity. An example of one classroom's independent activities were read to self, read to someone, listen to reading, work on writing, and do word work. There are plenty of ideas and books on literacy stations, but you need to find what works best for you. When possible, activities should be built off of previous whole group instruction. A classroom library should include books and magazines that interest children. They should be clearly labeled and organized with a variety of levels. The library should look inviting to students. Spending time to organize your books and teaching the children how to find and put books away will save you time and headaches. Some people have personal book boxes or bags for children, while others allow students to move freely through the classroom library. To ensure students select books right for them, teach them how to choose a just right book should be taught throughout the first 6 weeks. Here is an example of a well-organized and labeled classroom library. Notice the tub is clearly labeled and each book is labeled in the upper right corner so students know where to return the book. All books are facing forward so children can read the title and see the cover. Tubs are easily accessible and at their eye level. Besides the information shared in the Next Steps Forward text and from Smeckens, we suggest you might also consult Guiding Readers and Writers, specifically the section on the first 20 days. Other popular resources you might find helpful include the Daily Five, books by Debbie Dillard, and the Florida Center for Reading Research, linked in this presentation. Can you get everything done in a 90-minute reading block? Of course you can. A timer is the best way to ensure you don't spend too much time in a certain area. I always set a timer for my guided reading groups, but never thought to do so for my mini lessons. That was an aha moment for me when reading Next Step Forward. Simple yet effective. Here is a sample of a reading block broken down by minutes to show how everything can be accomplished. The instruction can be in any order that works for you. Remember, if you have more than 3 guided reading groups, you do not need to meet with each group daily. We will give you a moment to look over the chart. Notice that each area of instruction is 10 to 15 minutes long, but guided reading is 20 minutes. This is a powerful time for you to teach to the areas your students need based on the data that you have collected. In the back of Next Steps Forward, there are guided reading plan sheets for every level of reader. They are a great and helpful resource. It is a way to document how the day's lesson went and what steps should be taken next. It ensures all areas of the lessons are covered and you are well prepared. We will not be discussing word study, vocabulary, and phonics, but to be a successful reader, we know that these 3 areas need to be included in our daily instruction. At Daily, we have had many discussions how to incorporate good vocabulary and phonics instruction. It is a work in progress, and we are still trying to perfect this. While you are with your guided reading groups, you cannot be certain if all students are engaged in their independent reading. Jan Richardson gives these few suggestions to ensure that they are being held accountable. First, schedule weekly reading conferences for students not engaged during independent reading. Help them find books that they will enjoy and can read. It could be possible the text is too difficult. Depending on the grade level, each week students could do some sort of written response, whether it is a drawing, writing a few sentences, paragraphs, or pages, responding to their independent reading. You can base the response around a lesson that you have been focusing on. For example, if making inferences based on character action has been your focus, you could have students give 2 or 3 examples from their text where they were able to make that type of inference. Students can keep a log of books that they have read. They could add a review as to whether or not that they would recommend a book to a friend. Every day, ask a few students to talk about the books that they are reading during their independent time. All students will eventually get a time in which to share, but they won't know when that time will be. How do I keep my kids from interrupting during guided reading? Front-loading and spending time at the beginning will save time and energy throughout the year. Students will know that guided reading is a time that you are not available. During the first 6 weeks of school, model and practice all parts of the guided reading block so students know exactly what to do. This will make for an efficient and engaging classroom. If students know the classroom routines and expectations, they should be able to work independently while you are in guided reading. Do not respond if a child tries to interrupt while you are in groups. If you respond, they will continue to interrupt. Some teachers have a hand signal to remind students not to disturb them. You can have a couple of extra chairs near you at the guided reading table for students who are disruptive while working on their own. They can sit near you and read from their independent book while you finish your group. Afterwards, you can discuss the problem. Everyone has their own classroom management and bag of tricks to pull from in order to have a successful guided reading time. These are just a few the Next Steps Forward books recommend.
As we mentioned at the beginning, we are delving deeper into the Next Step Forward text at Mary Daly. Excuse me. We're excited to be undertaking this as a staff as we build our common understandings. We hope today's presentation was helpful to you as a springboard to designing your own guided reading block, or as confirmation that you are already that you already have the necessary components in place. Feel free to contact us if you have questions or wish to share your thoughts.
Enjoy the rest of your day.